Welcome to the world of horror. Follow Holy Monday and enjoy spin-chilling horror stories. There's a small hill town by the sea in Spain called Salou. It's got white-walled houses, tiny little streets, and every hour you hear the church bells ringing. During the day, the place looks like a postcard or a painting, but as soon as night falls, an eerie chill settles over Santa Lucia. This story is about 19-year-old Mateo Guerrero, who recently came to Santa Lucia from Madrid, Spain. He's an architecture student, fascinated by old European towns. Mateo used to study and document buildings. The ancient church of Santa Lucia and a 100-year-old house were part of his research. Santa Lucia was a really beautiful town, but it was super quiet. Mateo noticed that as soon as evening came, people hurried home quickly. After dark, you wouldn't see a single person walking around outside. One evening, Mateo was researching an old cemetery right next to the church. That's when he noticed something strange. Inside the cemetery, near a grave, there was a broken wedding arch standing there, like someone. No one ever got married there, and then she left him. Dried flowers were hanging on the arch. The dirt under that arch gate was a bit darker than the rest of the place. Matthew didn't pay much attention to it, but since that night, something strange started happening to him. At night, while he was working in his guest house room, he heard faint footsteps outside, like the soft rustling of fabric. He looked out the window. The street was completely empty, but at the corner of the street, there was a white silhouette standing. It looked like a woman, wearing a long white gown. Wearing it, Mateo thought it might be a tourist, but just like that, the woman vanished into thin air. The next night, the same sound came again. This time, Mateo opened the window a little. A really cold breeze blew into the room despite the summer heat, and it felt like someone had just walked right past his gate. Down on the stone street, there were some marks like footprints left by wet mud, and those footprints were heading straight towards the old cemetery. Mateo couldn't resist and started following those footprints all the way to the cemetery. It was past 2 a.m. The church bell rang. There was no one around for miles except Mateo. He stepped inside the cemetery. The air felt even colder there. Walking past old crosses and gravestones, Mateo reached the broken wedding arch, the same arch he had seen the day before, and where he had first seen her. Under the arch stood a woman in a white wedding gown that looked pretty old. Her face was partly covered with a white veil. It seemed like she was standing there, waiting for someone. Mateo took a step forward, and suddenly, the wind seemed to stop completely. The silence inside that graveyard grew so deep that Mateo could even hear his own heartbeat. The woman slowly turned toward him. Her veil lifted just a little, and the face Mateo saw made him freeze in shock. Her skin was completely pale. Her eyes were terrifying, like some spirit had possessed her. And there were bloodstains on her face, probably dried up like she'd cried bloody tears years ago. Mateo noticed that the woman, his feet weren't touching the ground at all. Mateo's whole body went cold, like he'd frozen solid. But before anything else could happen, the woman dissolved into thin air and vanished suddenly. Mateo didn't sleep a wink all night. The next morning, when the old caretaker of the guest house showed up, Mateo asked him about the woman. The caretaker didn't say anything at first, but when Mateo mentioned the wedding arch in the cemetery, the caretaker's face turned pale. The old man then began to tell him a story that started back in 1889. That year, a wedding was about to take place in Santa Lucia. The bride's name was Isabella Romero, and the groom was Javier Morales. Their wedding was being celebrated as the happiest couple in town. The mandap was set up near the cemetery because the church was under renovation. On the wedding night, everyone gathered together. Isabella made her way to the mandap in the wedding ground, but her groom never showed up. Later, it was found out that Javier had run off with another girl just a few hours before the wedding, leaving Santa Lucia behind. Isabella waited the whole night under the mandap for him. The night grew colder, and before dawn, she just fell right there. Her heart had stopped. Some say she suffered a huge shock that caused her death. Isabella's body was buried in that very cemetery. But after that night, something strange started happening in Santa Lucia. Sometimes, at night, people see a woman in a white wedding dress standing under the cemetery's archgate, like she's still waiting for someone. They call her the dead bride or corpse bride. Mateo got really scared after hearing this story. He had seen that dead bride himself just last night. That night, when Mateo was in his room, he heard the same sound again. This time, the footsteps came right up to his door, and then a strange smell filled the air like wet earth and old flowers. Mateo started to get scared. He quietly glanced toward the door. A shadow was visible underneath it, like someone was standing right outside. Then, the door handle slowly began to move on its own. Open the gear. Nervous and sweating, Mateo was trembling. Suddenly, the handle stopped moving. Then, with a loud creak, the door swung open all by itself. But there was no one at the door. A few seconds later, the sound of footsteps faded away again. Then, Mateo's eyes landed on the window of his room. Outside the window stood that terrifying woman, still in the same white wedding gown, staring right at Mateo with those horrible eyes. And then, suddenly, she vanished. Mateo couldn't sleep all night again. And as soon as morning came, he went and told everything to the church priest. The priest said no one had ever seen that dead bride do anything like that before. The priest asked, when Simitri went there, he didn't bring anything back. Then Mateo remembered that he had actually brought some dried flowers from there. Priscilla said that maybe that's why the spirit came all the way to Mateo's house, like the ghost thought her groom had come back to take her away. Priscilla told Mateo he needed to leave town immediately, or else that woman might never stop chasing him. Hearing this, Mateo's heart sank, and he decided he'd leave San Lucia that very day. But when Mateo went back home to pack his things, he saw there were wet mud marks right at the doorstep, just like the ones near Simitri's place. Mateo was starting to get scared. He quickly began packing his stuff. Then he looked out the window and saw the sky changing color, turning dark. Suddenly, the lights in the house started flickering, and then everything went completely dark. Heavy rain began pouring down and thunder roared. Then, lightning struck again, and that woman appeared right in front of Mateo. As soon as he saw her, he screamed loudly. Just then, the old caretaker of the guest house arrived outside. He stood by the window and looked inside. Mateo was freaking out, yelling, and right in front of him stood a terrifying woman in a white gown. He ran inside the house, reaching Mateo's room, but by then, it was already too late. Mateo wasn't there. A few hours later, Mateo's dead body was found buried in the damp soil right under the same wedding arch in the cemetery. Since that day, everyone believed that the ghost of the dead bride took Mateo as her groom and took him away with her forever. So, friends, how did you like the story of the ghost bride? If you liked this story, make sure to quickly subscribe to our channel Kuni Monday and keep watching more spine-chilling horror stories every week.